Hello, this is Dr. Young, and I'm going to go over our first presentation for the class. And so this class is all about lean management. And when we talk about lean, when you may have heard of it already. You probably heard of it in the context of a start to finish, a temporary initiative, something that will only last a certain period of time, but technically it's not supposed to be implemented that way. It's supposed to be a change in the way you do things. So you'll hear that a lot in this class. What happens is a lot of times a company will need to make some changes. And, there's some inefficiencies they've noticed or defects in their products or issues, and they'll say, well, let's take on this initiative and we'll cut costs and we'll cut waste and we'll cut manufacturing defects and we'll do this for so long, and then we'll stop and just go about doing business like we always have. You can't really do that. So what we're going to talk about in this first presentation is mostly definitions. What is lean? Where did it originate from? Historical background, and just kind of overall philosophy. So this is an introductory course to lean management, and we're not going to get, it's more of a broad overview. We'll talk about examples. We'll talk about process. But we won't, it's basically to give you a good foundational knowledge of it. So for week 1, we've got lean thinking, TPS, and the first steps. So let's go. So what is it? What is lean anyway? Well, it is a strategy developed by Toyota 2 decades ago. And they wanted to eliminate waste, improve processes, and save costs. That was the goal. And this is where it comes from. Toyota, TPS is Toyota Production System. And that's where it originated. But it is a way of thinking. It is a business strategy. And it is something that can help really any organization. It doesn't have to be a manufacturing organization. Principles of lean can be used for process, service, making just more efficient operation overall. Doesn't mean you have to make a widget or whatever in a factory. That's not required. I didn't use lean. I used Six Sigma. You may have heard of that. That is a more statistical breakdown of how to make. Basically, it's like you time a process, or you count defects, and then you use the z-scores and statistical methods to create a benchmark of, okay, so this product has so many defects per million. Now let's make these changes, and then let's test it afterwards and see if we've decreased our defects. In my case, I used it for billing time. So, and I'll get into that later, but basically that's just a different way of kind of doing something similar, which is basically how can we cut, I guess then in a nutshell, how can we cut defects if it's more of a product manufacturing situation, or how can we decrease time, or how can we decrease number of steps to complete a process? Things like those are all the ways that these strategies can help. And it just depends on what it is you're trying to make more efficient, basically. And so I come from a background, I worked at GE, so we use Six Sigma. Toyota uses lean, but there's some similarities here, and as far as overall purpose. So what is lean strategy? The aim is to learn to solve problems and avoid waste. I think I need to change that, so I will change that. And create flow. Create a consistent flow. when we're talking about flow, we're talking about, okay, think of a manufacturing facility, and everyone's got their little place in that, so and so. Let's just say, car manufacturing. Of course, obviously you should use that. Someone's putting on the windows, someone's putting in the engine, someone's putting on a fender. It doesn't matter what it is, but you got situations where there's bottlenecks. You got situations where maybe one part of the system's not efficient and the other parts are, causing delays, gaps. So we want to create a flow. We want to get everything going in a very smooth, operation, where there's not stopping and starting, where there's not build up in one area, and then you've got on down the line, people are waiting, to work on whatever it is, whether it's a car or whatever it is. So you see what I'm saying? You want to make sure that everything flows, is going as smoothly as possible, is moving on. We don't have a lot of gaps, starting and stopping, and inefficiencies in that way. Wasted time, wasted materials, things like that. Frame solutions that emerge from problem solving. And this is just the way, you're thinking, because you're always thinking of, how can I solve this problem? How can I solve that problem? And even when you think you've solved a problem, later on you might come up with a better way to do it that even increases efficiency even more. So this is not, okay, we have a problem. Let's use lean, and let's decrease our process one time, and let's keep that process. No, that's not how it works. Lean is something you're always thinking about. How can I do this better? What if a new technology comes up? Oh, I can try that technology to complete task A. Oh, well, what about 3 or 4 months down the line? You need to be on top of what's out there. What tools can you use to make things easier? What tools can you use to make things faster? So you're continuously thinking this way. And it becomes like, maybe you're working at a job, and I'll use an old example, because obviously this is going to make me look old, but that's okay. I worked at GE when email, well, it wasn't email, but when basically they were changing from a environment where we were a call center taking calls, to a center where we were answering emails more, and doing less phone calls. So this is new technology coming through. You've got the website, the ability to communicate digitally, the prevalence of that, the growth of that, versus phone calls, versus calling people, 1-800 numbers. So that changed everything for us. I mean, that technology came on, and it changed everything. It basically changed the way we do things. With lean, you're always thinking of, what's next? What's the next thing that can help us be more efficient, change the way we do things, move forward, improve. Okay, so moving on, we got waste, and then lean, you have 8 wastes. And there's a video on that. I want you to watch that. I'm going to let you go to this YouTube video. I put some videos in here throughout because I feel like they're going to be useful to you. So just, take time to review those. But, you got 8 wastes. You got defects, overproduction, waiting, talent that's not being utilized, transportation, inventory, motion, and extra processing. These are all types of wastes. So we're going to talk more about that later. Like I said, this is kind of the introduction here. But all of those things, actually I didn't, wait a minute, let me go back there. Sorry, I didn't mean to do that. So go to this video and take a look at that. These should be in your text too, but we're going to be working on those. The waste that I just talked about are the things we're going to be discussing when we're talking about making things more efficient. Lean strategy versus traditional. So lean is a different way of thinking about capabilities. The roles of leadership is different. We're going to be talking about that. Less of an authoritarian, more of a collaborative type of leadership. When you're working on lean teams, there's going to be more autonomy. People, as a leader, you need to think about what your team is going to offer you as far as suggestions and, ways of doing things better. You need to be open to that. Different relationships between thinking and acting. And that's something you're going to read about in your text more. Just make sure to read chapter 1. So in a traditional situation, your leader defines high level change. So your leader's telling you what you need. Here are our goals. How are you, and then they'll tell you how to reach those goals. And then you'll do your duties. And then, basically they're handed down to you. Changes are driven through organizations, through projects or systems. I'll change that. So, most of the time you're going to have a lot of project work in traditional organization where your manager will say, okay, we need to do this project. This is part of our initiatives, and we need you to gather the resources, the labor resources, the expertise that's needed to complete those projects. And problems will occur during that process, and they're resolved, but usually that costs money and wasted time. So, for your lean framework, this is, it improves value by increasing flow of high quality products and services. It addresses and adapts goals continuously to external conditions. So it's always monitoring, like doing a SWOT analysis, making sure what are the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats coming from the outside. And it improves internal conditions by freeing resources and supports and coaches employees in their relation to work and focusing their work on customers. And in your book, The Lean Turnaround, it's really going to talk about that as far as example. The Lean Turnaround book that you have is kind of a real life type of situation where you see it in action. You see the employees go through questions, they don't understand the changes, and adapting to the changes and really moving from a traditional framework to a lean framework. So I'm going to make sure that you read that too. The chapters, make sure that you're looking at that because that's going to help you understand how it works in real life. So make sure you're reading that text. So in lean, you got continuous innovation, and you're always learning and innovating. Value and Kaizen, which again is a term we're going to get into in more detail later in the course. So every time you're doing any kind of value-adding activities in your organization, you are basically in a state of continuous improvement. How can you improve this? How can you improve this task? How can you improve this task? And it really becomes a mindset. So, just to talk more about the origin and some of the terms that we're going to talk about, lean originated in the Toyota production system. It was established on two concepts, which is Jidoka and just-in-time. Jidoka is which each process produces only what is needed by the next process in a continuous flow. Only what is needed. And then just-in-time is when a problem occurs, the equipment stops immediately, preventing defective products from being produced, which is very important in reducing defects, obviously. And so I want you to look at these sites because this one will give you a little bit more of a historical, philosophical perspective on the Toyota production system. And then decoding the DNA of the Toyota production system as well. These are just two two resources I want you to take a look at to go over that, give you some background on TPS, more than what I'm giving you. I don't want to read you all of the history. I mean, you can do that, but just make sure that you check those out. So for TPS, I'm just going to call it TPS. It's based on the principle that waste is the result of someone's misconception. And then excess inventory can do more harm than good, obviously. In the text, there's a tomato sauce example. I want you to read about that. Just read the chapters that were assigned to you in your syllabus. And then, obviously, excess inventory affects other areas. The cost of unneeded inventory storage, wear on machinery. So, you want to avoid excess inventory. And there's a really cool simulation that we're going to be doing in this class later on, and I think you'll really enjoy it. It's kind of it's a nice simulation about having too much inventory. You have to balance everything. All right, now there's lean thinking. We're talking about lean management, and we're talking about lean thinking. There's lean manufacturing, and they're not the same. I guess the main point I want to bring here is that in lean manufacturing, it's all in the concept of manufacturing and product defects and everything, but lean thinking can be applied to any type of business. It doesn't just have to be manufacturing. Lean thinking can be used in any business, and it becomes part of the overall strategy, and is not usually correctly implemented in organizations. Like I said at the beginning of the presentation, a lot of times it's thought of as a short-term fix, but it's not. It's supposed to be something that is basically incorporated into the way of doing business in a company for the rest of, as long as the company's in business, pretty much. So that's why what happens is most of the time companies will implement it and then it'll fade off. They'll start out real strong, they'll lose interest, and then it'll just fade off. So that's what I wanted. That's the major point I want to make for this presentation, is that's usually what happens. So that's why it's not always successfully implemented in companies. So the first steps in a lean transformation is, so you have to present the idea of lean, obviously, and you have to emphasize that it is a change and a permanent change, but you also have to tell them how it will benefit them. And then you have to start by separating value adding from wasteful activities, and then you have to visualize the value stream that you deliver to your customer. What does that mean? Well, you have to create a smooth flow of value by alleviating or protecting the bottlenecks in your process. Now, remember what I talked about earlier, a flow, preventing bottlenecks, preventing wasted time, preventing stops and starts. Not only wasted time, but wear on your, in this situation, I'm thinking of a manufacturing situation. Wear on your equipment. You have to think about that too. Stopping and starting, machinery can wear it down quicker. So you have to think of everything. Pull new work only when there is a demand for it and you have spare capacity. So that means, if you don't have the capacity, then don't pull new work. Don't add more work. And this might not make sense in theory, but when we do our simulation later, I think it'll probably make more sense, because there's a demand component to that. Basically, I don't know why I do that. I think I forgot my reference. Okay. Adopt the proper culture in order to achieve continuous improvement of your process. Really, this is probably the hardest part, because you really got to get everyone to buy into it and continually practice it. This difficulty will be reflected in the book that you have of the Lean Turnaround. When you see people, when you're reading it, you're going to see how some of the characters are like, I don't understand. I don't feel like I know what I'm doing. I don't think this is, they have doubts. That's the hardest part. And then just kind of letting it fall by the wayside, because you need everyone on board. And here's another example. Here's another example that I want you to look at too. It will give you an idea. And it's LEI. I can't remember what the name is. What is LEI? It's a company. I can't remember what it is. Is it electronics? I think that's it. I think it's an electronics company. Or it might be a home enhancement company. Anyway, look at that site. And that's really all for this this lecture. Let me just pull that up. I had that, when I put that on there, it's been a while since I had looked at this presentation. And but make sure to go to all of these links that I have given you, because they're kind of examples, more explanation on what Lean is. And, this was basically more of an overview, but we're going to get a little bit more involved in the whole process for the rest of the term. Let's see here. Just make sure I can get this. Yeah, Lean. No, it's Lean Enterprise Institute. Sorry. So if you go to this video, it'll give you a kind of an overview of what we're talking about, a little bit more detail. The Lean Enterprise Institute's a good resource. I would visit that. Look at they have a lot of stuff on there that might be helpful. When you feel like you're confused about any of the terminology in the book, just go. That site will offer some clarity as well. So that's really all. This is more of an overview of it, of Lean. Any questions or concerns, let me know. And I look forward to hearing from you in the course this week. And have a great week. Thank you.